Hi, welcome to Trailhead DX, and welcome to a session which is going to be all about the Wave platform. My name is Skip Sauls. I'm a Director of Product Management, and I recently moved over to the Wave platform about 6 months ago, where I'm entirely focused on things that relate to developers. Things like APIs, packaging, what we sometimes call ALM, Application Lifecycle Management, and most excitingly for me, the new SDK that we're working on. I worked for the first couple of 2.5 years here at Salesforce on things like Visualforce and Lightning components. I'm very familiar with those, and you're going to see some things we're doing to merge Wave and Lightning much more closely together. So I think you'll appreciate this, especially if you've been using the Force.com platform for the past few years. We want to make you understand that Wave actually runs inside the data center right there with Force.com and uses a lot of the same technologies. It's not really a separate stack, which is often the perception. So with that, I am going to talk about some roadmap features today. This used to be our safe harbor slide. Now it's our forward-looking statements. The things I showed today here are all coming in the next few releases, but don't make any purchasing decisions and so forth around that. You've heard the drill, I'm sure, several times. But I will show you some things that are coming, some that are in winter, some that are even a little further out than that. So what's the agenda? We're going to have a few slides and lots of hands-on demos here where I'm going to show you things running, actually show you the code, talk about it. It's not going to be a big marketing pitch. In fact, I'll tell you that if you want to see the Wave marketing pitch and learn about all the great business benefits, I'm not really the right guy to show you that right now. But we'll briefly touch on that for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Mainly we'll focus on the Wave platform here, APIs, ALM, and SDKs. And you probably know these acronyms. You've probably used them frequently, but we'll cover those in great detail and leave some time for Q&A. So a little bit about Wave Analytics. We're part of the Analytics Cloud. You know, Salesforce organizes itself into clouds. And there's the traditional analytics that you're probably familiar with, and then there's Wave Analytics, which is a different stack and designed with a bit of a different purpose here. So what are we focused on with Wave? Well, we want to bring analytics into every application and move you from driving your apps with traditional data coming just directly out of a database to coming out of a larger data set. Wave is very good at managing things that have millions of records, millions of rows. So it's highly optimized for that. It's very different from traditional Force.com, traditional database-driven applications. You see here kind of the progression here. Everyone wants to run things on their devices. We certainly run lots of stuff on there today. Wave has been designed from the start to be mobile first. And you've probably heard this from other parts of Salesforce. Salesforce One being a great example of this. We do a lot of things to make sure it runs really well on mobile, as well as running great on the desktop. And as we move into things like IoT with lots and lots of devices out there, you move up to even bigger and bigger data sets, and Wave plays a big part of that. We also want to make sure that we can have a great platform for all of our customers and provide a complete set of solutions. Analytics fits in a way that perhaps has been different in the past, where we said, oh, if you're a business analyst, or if you're someone who's going to go in and do charts and graphs and reports and that kind of thing, that's kind of the traditional analytics user. We look at it very differently, saying that every app should be analytics driven, and if I'm using my app, it's very efficient and it does the things I want. So we're very focused on making sure that we can present the right things and the right set of data, and you're not sitting there trying to look at the chart and try to figure out how it makes sense there. In fact, the person who's in the field wants to use their app and have it have the correct things for them right now, as opposed to having to try to decipher something or to have someone tell them how to decipher it. So we talk about data plus insights plus actions. So we know there's lots of data. Insights being, how do you run the right kind of queries to find things out about it? And then actions. We've built in support for the platform actions. So you can actually set up actions inside of Salesforce. So from Wave, you can drive other parts of the application. We actually have 2 apps that we're shipping right now. We have Sales Wave and Service Wave. Sales Wave is obviously focused on the traditional sales customers. Service Wave is new, and this is for service reps, and it's part of the Service Console. And these are very exciting because these give you ways to add in additional functionality for your traditional sales type applications, And importantly for service reps who need to be able to see things very rapidly at a glance and be able to know how to take action. Over time, we'll add more to this stack, but as you're going to see, what we're really excited about is customers building their own custom applications and partners building out things to round out this ecosystem. So the Salesforce advantage. You're here, so you probably know this already. We're very excited because we are sitting on top of the best platform stack. Now, there's various arguments about different types of clouds and that sort of thing. You know that Salesforce is a little different. We're not a traditional external cloud where you go and run all your own stuff there. There's nothing wrong with those, but Salesforce wants to make sure that you're successful with your business, and it also appeals to different types of users. And you're going to see today that even though we're going to talk about some of the programmatic aspects in terms of APIs and so forth, much of what we're building in Wave is actually designed for the declarative side. So from various user interfaces, various tools, you can go off and build very powerful applications. And what I'm very passionate about is making sure that there's not the declarative cliff, something Salesforce has done in the past where we say, use all these great tools and build this awesome app. And then you say, well, I want to do something different. And we say, oh, start over again down here with Apex and Visualforce and so forth. So we're trying to make sure we have a nicer transition with Wave since we have learned from our previous actions. So I'm going to do a very brief demo of Wave Analytics. Again, I'm not trying to sell you on the marketing aspects, but I'll show you a bit about what's inside here. So this is the main Wave UI, and you can actually access this from either the traditional Aloha or now Salesforce Classic UI or from Lightning, Lightning Experience. And it's broken up into the different types of Wave assets. We see here apps, dashboards, lenses, and data sets. Just very briefly, an app is effectively a folder or a directory, and it's a collection of things that are related. So it's a way for you to organize things. There's really nothing more than that. It's just an organizational piece. Apps are obviously a very much overused term, both at Salesforce and in the industry. In this case, it's a collection, and if you've used Lightning, it's a lot like a Lightning bundle. It says, here's all the things that are related inside it. Dashboards are one of the traditional ways for people to view Wave Analytics. And it's a way to organize things into rows and columns and add various controls, make it interactive. And a lens is a view onto some sort of data set, traditionally exposed as some sort of chart or graph or table, and it has a query associated with it. We'll show you one of those in a second. And then the data sets are the way you've organized the data, coming both from Salesforce and externally. And you'll see here that traditionally you might say, let's create a data set. I'm not going to go through all the steps here, but if we wanted to create a Salesforce data set, we can go in here now and see all the objects, and then we can go in here and add which fields we want, and from that, basically generate a data set. Now, the second part that we're not going to get into for this demo because it takes a little more time is the data monitor. And in here, you have things called data flows. And a data flow is something set up to run at some particular interval, and it says go off and bring the data into Wave. So at a technical level, what Wave does is it imports your data, and you can do all kinds of transforms, you can add additional metadata, you can do lots of things that make it more sensible for you from the analytics perspective. And then it flattens things out into a database, and then heavily indexes it, so it makes it very efficient. If you're used to using traditional force.com, you know that it scales up, and it can handle hundreds or thousands of things. Probably not ideal for millions of things. It doesn't really work that well. You run into limits very quickly. Wave has much higher limits because it's a very different technology in terms of how we do the back-end runtime. It's not based on a traditional SQL database. So you have much higher limits of numbers of rows, much higher API calls and that sort of thing, because it's designed for you to use it in a very different way. So these will run at some interval. Traditionally, it was a one-day interval. Now it's down to 1 hour. And this will depend on how long it takes for your data flow to run. Your data flow can actually take several hours. One large customer has a data flow that takes approximately 18 hours because it's so much data being ingested. And then at that point, it's ready to use inside a Wave. And we would typically go in and build something like a lens. So we'll say create a lens. Well, let's actually create a data set and add a lens onto it here. Let's see here. I'm going to go and create one for opportunities. And this gives me a little graph. I'm going to change this a bit, and we'll add a group for the account name. and we can do groups for things like the stage. And this is traditional Salesforce data, but to make it more interesting, we've populated it with a lot more records there. We've added a lot more things inside it. And then traditionally, someone might go in and say, well, let's view it as a donut chart. We can do things like add filters to it. You're saying, well, let's make it so that it's only these particular accounts. And you would keep refining this. And if you want to look at it from a technical level, you can bring up the SAQL editor, SAQL. That's Salesforce Analytics query language, which is different from SAQL. And we'll zoom in a bit here to show it to you. So this is being generated as we change this here. And this is what the query being run behind the scenes. We're going to show you here in a minute how you can take this query and you can run this independently of the dashboard of the lens. So it's not tied to it directly. The queries can actually run completely independently. You can get back data and display that in your own UIs, as I'll show you here inside of Lightning and Visualforce. So this is the tools people would use, and then they would ultimately end up with things like the dashboards we see here. And let's bring up one like the Sales Wave Customer Analysis with Product dashboard. And so this dashboard is one where someone has gone in and they've added additional controls, additional features, and you would typically show this inside of, say, Lightning Experience. So this could be on somebody's page, they bring this up, and it's fully interactive. You can click inside here, you can zoom in on things, and what's happening here is it's actually internally changing the data being displayed here. So it's changing the filters, changing the selections, even changing the queries in some cases. And what you're going to see here later on in the demo is that we can actually tie this to Lightning events. So we're working right now to actually be able to fire events outside of the Wave dashboard and have your Lightning apps react to it. And importantly, fire events from Lightning components into Wave, so you can actually change things there. So we're looking at opening things up quite a bit, making it much better from a programmatic perspective. So you can build apps that do work the way you want to. It's not just entirely dashboard-centric. And nothing wrong with dashboards, it's just not every app is a dashboard. That's been sort of the misconception about analytics, is that it's all dashboard driven. Okay, so back into our presentation. So let's talk a bit about the API. If you go back in the past couple of years, Wave had a REST API, but it was always an internal API. It wasn't fully public. We had some partners that built proof of concepts and that kind of thing on it. But as with anything that's not fully public, fully GA, you can't support that kind of thing. And long term, it's not very good to have those. And it also was a different sort of technology for it. It was a different sort of REST API. Like a lot of acquisitions, we had things that we used before, and then now we're doing the version that's for Salesforce. So we're building we've built a Connect-based API, or somewhat called the Chatter API. And this is actually just the standard for Salesforce for doing REST API calls. And the key thing here is it works in the same way as the other Force.com APIs. We use the same sort of session IDs, the same security tokens. You can do OAuth, you can do SAML, you can do SSO, whichever you'd like there. There is no difference there. And if you go into things like the Workbench, you're going to now see Wave listed in there. So you have, /v37/wave/queries. You have assets, or various assets like dashboards, lenses, and so forth. And then you have all the standard operations, get, put, post, patch, delete, and so forth. And you can also do the queries, as we mentioned. So that SAQL we showed you is something you can parameterize from your external application and run queries against Wave, much as you would run queries against Salesforce using Apex in the past. So you could use things like SAQL instead of just SOQL. And then make it very highly scalable and performant. Again, it's important here that we're able to scale this up to millions of users, millions of records, and that sort of thing. And the higher limits are important there. And again, the limits are in place to protect the Salesforce from someone overusing it. Because Wave is running in effectively some separate banks of CPUs and so forth, we can actually not limit it quite so much. It's actually much higher. So in the API itself, I'm not going to belabor this and show you every little line here, but a key here is that we can actually run queries against anything. And this is the statement here, the SAQL that you can see on the screen. And you can imagine taking this from a Visualforce app or a Lightning app or an external app running on Heroku, Amazon, et cetera, and generating this based upon your UI. And this is important because not everybody wants to go back into the dashboard and change things there. They want to do it from their application. We have a couple of partners that are building some very interesting apps that are driven by things like real estate management, financial management, and they already have great applications. They don't want to redo everything as a dashboard, but they would like to use the Wave query results that are inside it. So they're actually calling it either from a REST API or from Apex, doing a call out and then merging that with their traditional data. Now what you get back is a JSON document. It has the records listed inside there. You can make it look just like something coming back from standard Apex, standard SQL queries, or something very different. You have to remember that what's inside a Wave is Salesforce plus whatever else you'd like to have in there. You don't have to bring everything in as S objects to use it there. Okay, so in this case in the query, I'm showing two different demos. I'm going to show these a little bit. The nice thing about this is because we've opened this up and we do it via the Connect APIs, we can build apps that run either on platform or off platform. These are not very pretty demos. These are just functional demos, but they show them running inside of things like Visualforce and Lightning. And then dashboards are the top level things that you can use, and we're working on allowing this to be something you can embed in your applications. And I'll show you a preview of this in the SDK demo. The dashboard itself is actually fairly complex. It's actually generated from a tool, and it's much like looking at documents generated by other tools. It's all in JSON. You think, oh, it's actually very sensible, but it's also very complex. It has different parts. You have to look at it. We're not sure many customers would need to look at the JSON coming back here, but if you're interested, it's kind of cool to see what happens there. And you can also modify it there. You can build your own tools if you wanted to. You can use the same APIs that we do and generate this if that's what's desirable. And we've had some partners in the past for Visualforce and now Lightning that do their own versions of things like app builders. So you can imagine they could actually incorporate this into their applications. So one thing I would like to do for a kind of call to action is to go check out our docs, and importantly, you know this, check out Trailhead, try things out. Our Trailheads right now really are intros to Wave. We don't have our developer-centric Trailhead out just yet. We're working on that. But if you go look at the API, it's just like looking at APIs for other parts of Salesforce. Same sort of docs. It works in the same way. You can use command line tools. You can use the workbench. You can write your own code. It's fully open, fully documented. And importantly, this is the API that we use for all of our own tools. Everything you see in those tools is written in the same way. We are deprecating and actually turning off all the old internal APIs. Again, that's part of our true API first push. So a couple of quick demos. Let's go here to the Wave query test. And this one is interesting because it's written in Visualforce. It uses the REST APIs, but it also uses some Apex. It actually sits on top of the REST APIs and provides a named query feature. And this was actually done as a way to show a way to do queries by name versus queries by SQL. If we go to the Lightning version here, let's zoom in a bit. We can see the query. In fact, let's go grab the one off of the one we were working with here. So let's copy this, and we'll go into Lightning and create a new one. And I'm just going to paste this in place and call this Trailhead DX. Oops, I get that wrong every time I type it. Save that, and then execute it. And this returns the results we were looking at in the view here. At the bottom, I'm putting in little stats here for how long it took, server side and client side, what the execution time was. So again, very fast. If we had a race in this versus Apex and SQL, Wave is going to be much faster in pretty much every case. So don't think of it as being a cache for force.com. That's not really the intent there. But you can bring data in, run some very interesting queries against it, and run them very frequently. Again, it's meant for kind of a different use case. Now, in the Visualforce version, I'm going to reload this here. And let's go here to the Trailhead DX. We're going to execute this by name. We see the results here. And importantly, we get back results, but we're not getting back the SQL statement. Well, that's a big one there. Because we're suppressing this. We're saying if you're not in the same namespace, if you don't own this namespace, you don't get to see that. And this is important for our partners who put a lot of effort into building up their queries, and they say, the query is my IP, that's my intellectual property. I don't want somebody to see that. We're not going to pass that back and forth to clients. So this gives us a way to keep it on the server. This is all built using the summer release. You can build this now. It's actually not tons of code. It's written in Visualforce plus JavaScript. The Lightning version is obviously written with Lightning markup and JavaScript as well. And the two are just simple examples of how to call out to it. I'll show you more of this in the SDK demo, which actually wraps the REST API and provides a way for you to call out things without having to do direct REST calls for everything. So we try to shield you from that. And again, we could bring up Workbench and go through and explore it, but you'll basically see that it has a standard way to navigate. Everything has full URLs. It's truly RESTful. If you like to go and start at the top and navigate down and back up, everything is fully hyperlinked like you'd expect there. Okay, so let's go back into our presentation. It's in one of these. There we go. So let's talk about ALM for a couple of minutes. So ALM is Application Lifecycle Management. And this is important because in the past, we would have partners who built apps on top of Wave, but they couldn't distribute them. They couldn't sell them. They didn't have a way to make it easy for someone to actually take it and install their app and use it. You know from traditional Salesforce packages, you can build a package very easily. You can add all the components. You can push it up to AppExchange, create your listing. It's all very simple, very straightforward. You can now do the exact same thing with Wave. We use the exact same metadata infrastructure, all the same features, the same tools. You don't have to go into a separate tool to build a Wave application, and you can now list these on the AppExchange. So we want to be able to package, publish, and importantly, if you're a partner, be able to sell this. A lot of our partners have built out great apps on there. They can now add Wave into it. And you can do so either as an add-on, an extension, if you will, or as a separate package entirely, or build it into your main package. It depends on how you want to set up the licensing. We support most of the features you'd expect. There's a couple of things around what's called user XMD, which is the extended metadata. That's being worked on for the winter release coming up soon. And then the obfuscation and IP protection. This is important to note because we currently send basically JSON structures back and forth across the wire. As you know, that's pretty much in the clear. There is no way to really obfuscate that. You can try, but somebody can always unobfuscate it. It's not really possible to hide it. What we will be doing, as I mentioned, is things like the queries will be something you can do fully server-side. And we're looking at ways to at least hide it from the casual user on the client side if they're using various tools and so forth. But because of the nature of it, because it's web-based, you may not ever get to a full IP protection type thing. That being said, that's not really where the value is. And the dashboard itself is just layouts and controls and that kind of thing. So I'm not going to do a big demo of ALM. I might show a couple of things, a couple of screens. If you've done any sort of packaging before, it's the same process. You create a new package, you add your components to it, you then decide to basically upload it, you get back a link. You can take that and share that link with other people. You can use it to create your AppExchange listings. And then you can do all of the things like versioning and push upgrades and that sort of thing. So it's all fully supported. Again, we're very excited by this, even though as a feature, it's probably not all that exciting for Salesforce, but it's very useful. And again, by making it work in the standard force.com way, you don't have to learn something new. And then publish it. This is actually some screens from the publisher. If you're a partner, you would go to the partner community, you would go to your publishing console, and you basically fill in some of these forms to create your listing. And importantly, you're going to have to submit it for a security review. So they're going to go through and look through it and see what kind of external libraries you use and that kind of thing. If any of you have published Lightning components or Visualforce components, you're familiar with the drill. It's the same sort of process. And then be able to sell it. Again, show these listings inside of AppExchange. If you go to AppExchange right now, you'll see that there's actually a filter there for analytics. And there's a little note there about the Wave apps coming soon. Look for some announcements and launch type activities over the next 2 or 3 months in the run-up to Dreamforce. And then licensing support. The license management app is something that a lot of people are not really familiar with. In fact, even inside of Salesforce, we found that not many teams have actually built anything new in this area for quite some time because most things would sit on top of the traditional force.com and leverage those licenses. So we've added full license management support. So you, as a publisher, can indicate, how many licenses someone has, and then the admin who installs it can say, these users can use this particular package here, use this particular Wave feature. And then finally, here's some little logos of people who are building apps getting ready for these launch activities. We're hoping to have anywhere from, say, 15 to 20 AppExchange listings as we get towards Dreamforce, and then even more of those as the year progresses there. And some of these you're probably familiar with. A lot of these are traditional Salesforce partners. Some of them you're probably not familiar with because they've been more in the analytics space and haven't always been working with Salesforce directly. So we're getting both external new partners as well as traditional partners. And we're very excited to have all of these partners building very nice, interesting Wave apps. Some will be things that are very dashboard-centric. Some, as you're going to see, will not be dashboard-driven at all. They're very data-driven. They have their own UIs. You won't necessarily know you're using Wave because it's built in. It's on the back end. So I'm not going to do much of a demo here, but I just want to show you where it is inside here. Let's go to Setup, do a new one. It's probably a little bit zoomed out for this. And if we go down to Create and then Packages, and we'll just use one that's already inside here. And we'll see here if we add, and we scroll down, see if this will zoom in a bit. I guess it's not going to zoom that, is it? There we go. So we see Wave application, dashboard, data flow, data set, lens, and template. And over time, we'll probably add a few more different assets here as we add features to Wave. But all of our teams work very hard to make sure that they have an API and now ALM represented for your Wave application. So there shouldn't be many cases where you can't publish something into Wave. And where it gets interesting, too, is we do the dependency checking, what our devs love to call spidering. And if you add in, say, an application, it'll pull in all the dashboards, lenses, data sets, and that sort of thing that are related to it. The one area that you might have to manually add things is around the data sets and data flows. You might need to add one of those manually. There's not always a pure dependency between those two. There's no way for us to link that necessarily. And then you can do upload and so forth, just like you would traditionally. Okay. Now let's talk a bit about the SDK. So who here is familiar with the mobile SDK from Salesforce? Okay, we've got a couple hands. So we've had a mobile SDK for a while now that people use to build custom apps on top of iOS and Android. And it's a great SDK. We're going to add on to that with Wave, but importantly, we're providing an SDK for other platforms as well. Things we're targeting are things like the web and then various mobile devices, and we want to make it very easy for you to build Wave applications. So initially, we're looking at providing things like data APIs as well as some of the visualization pieces, and then over time, round it out to even allow for things like data flows and data sets, what's called ELT, so you can basically, how do you get things into Wave, how do you do transforms, how do you extract things out of Wave? So over time, we want to have API modules or SDK modules for everything that you can do inside of a Wave app. And a key here is reduce the need to call REST directly. Now, many of you are probably familiar with doing REST programming. I love REST, lots of people love REST, but it can be very cumbersome at times. You do a lot of work to get back a big blob of something, then you have to go through and decipher that and dig down into it and figure out how to submit it back to Salesforce. And if you're familiar with the Connect APIs, we have a bit of a disconnect between what you get from the server and what you send back to the server. Not to knock Connect or Chatter, but it's kind of annoying when you say, well, I want to send something back. I've got to filter it out and change it and maybe add things to it. So the SDK would mask that, would hide that from you, and do all those necessary transforms there. And then make things very object-centric. If you get back JSON, you can navigate this. If you're a JavaScript person, it's very easy. It's foo.bar.baz.whatever. But the hard part there is you say, well, what is this thing down here related to this thing up here? There may be a logical connection between them, but there's nothing timed together. At most, you might have an ID, and you have to go back and forth trying to figure out how to make that relationship matter. With the SDK, you'll deal with the top-level objects, and you will do dashboard.doSomething, dashboard.getSomething, wave.execute query, things like that, and make it very easy. And you won't worry so much about what those underlying data structures look like. Importantly, make it very fast and efficient, very easy. Make it so that you can build apps rapidly and publish apps to App Exchange rapidly. And the part about publishing is interesting because when you go to a security review, they look at all the third-party libraries that you include there. So whether it's jQuery, Bootstrap, Angular, React, whatever, they do scans of those things to make sure it's the right thing. First off, it's slow. It takes a while for them to do all that. And it's annoying when you have something they have never seen before and they have to go through and figure out, is this thing going to be secure? We want people to use the SDK because we can have product security bless that SDK. And if you use that, you're not going to go through that additional scrutiny every time. You're writing code that's to the SDK, not to some third-party library. Again, not knocking third parties. I love them. It's just a slow process. Why does Salesforce do that? Because we have to protect our customers, protect our cloud. There's very good reasons for it. It's different from the open source world where it's sort of the Wild West and you're on your own in terms of security. You are part of Salesforce, you're using Salesforce because you expect that level of protection, that level of trust. So who are we targeting? We are looking at our partners and our programmatic app developers initially. And realistically, we're going to have a pilot or dev preview in winter 17. Now, it'll probably be off-cycle from the traditional releases, meaning that there'll be a GitHub repo, and you can pull down the SDK and use that. But ultimately, as we move to GA, we'll expect you to use one off of our CDN and say get wave/wave SDK.js or something like that. And that'll be the official version. But the cool thing is we're designing this to be very easy to use and allow it to be scriptable in some way. Whether that's JavaScript or some other scripting language, the idea is that someone can open up an editor and with a few lines of code, build or enhance an existing Wave application, dashboard, query, etc., and not have to write tons of code around this. And we talk about this for things like the citizen devs and the hero admins. And in the past, we've had customers and partners who have built some really cool things in, say, Visualforce that don't have a lot of programmatic code. It's a few lines of markup, you set a few attributes, set a few parameters, and you have a new application that meets the needs of your particular customers, whether it's your CEO or it's all of your salespeople, and you did so without writing a ton of code around that. So that's the vision we have for Wave, is doing the same sort of thing with a simple editor. So you write a few lines of code and you've built a new analytics app, built something that's not out of the box, and you didn't have to know all the gory low-level details around that. So that's what we're targeting so we get to the hero admins. And then platforms, we're hoping to have at least some form of an Apex SDK. It may be limited to things like queries. Apex is different from the others in that it's all server-side. We could potentially do all of the data APIs inside of Apex. It's not clear that's really the direction we'd take, but we'd at least like to have it so if you do call-outs and if you build things in Process Builder and so forth, you've got ways to call Wave very easily and let Wave be the way to get to your data as opposed to just using SOQL. And then the web is obviously a very big one. We're going to show you that in just a minute here in the demo. And then targeting some of the mobile platforms, iOS and Android. We may get to some early previews of these things by Dreamforce. Fingers crossed if we can show these, but realistically they would not be in the releases until later. And these would be the same sort of look and feel across there. You'd be able to embed a Wave dashboard, view a Wave component, and then give you data APIs for dashboards, lenses, and so forth, and be able to interoperate with them. And the differences between the platforms would be that of the language, but we would try to keep the naming as consistent as possible, so you move between the platforms very easily. And where we have things like existing SDKs for mobile, we would leverage those. In fact, we leverage things like Force TK and Force JS when we use the web-based version. So this is just to show you the type of efficiency gains. If you want to look at a preview of a Wave dashboard or Wave lens, it takes this kind of code here. And this is about as tight as I could make it, because you have to go through here and iterate over the files and create file buffers. And once you get all of that done, you get back the basically the bytes for the image that you can put into, say, a PNG or something. It's a lot of effort. In fact, it was this exercise here that led me to think, wow, we need an SDK, because this is kind of crazy to have to do this every single time. And as you can imagine, this is error-prone, where everybody does their own versions of this. If we change things on our back end, somebody has to rewrite this again here. So we want to get to where you call dashboard.getPreview or getThumbnail. The naming's not set in stone right now. And we would change this, and importantly, version it release over release. So if we decide to change out parts of our runtime, if we decide to change the way we return back the JSON, that's versioned. The SDK would keep you from having to know that every single time here. Okay, let's look at a demo. I think I'm doing okay on time. Okay, I'm very excited by this. I will warn you that this is a demo that's being built kind of as we speak, and things may crash and burn here. So we're going to go through here and watch stuff live. I do everything on either Heroku or Lightning or Visualforce. And we're going to run all the demos here on platform. And these are all running on the summer release. This just happens to use some of the SDK, which is not currently in the summer release. So let's look at a Wave SDK POC. So I'm going to refresh this. And you'll see here the URL is wave-sdk.herokuapp.com. So this is running on Heroku. I actually built this by taking the standard Node.js template you can get from Heroku, downloaded it, did a git clone, and started modifying it. In fact, this one uses the traditional Bootstrap, jQuery, and that kind of thing. It's not quite the cool kid with the Angular, React, and that kind of stuff, but it proves out you can use Wave with almost anything. And then let's zoom in a bit. It calls things like wave.getDashboards, wave.getApps. And underneath the covers, we'll still call them the REST API, but we take those REST responses, the JSON response, and we turn that into a proper first-class object. So we get back a dashboard, and the dashboard now has things you can do to it. So let's take a look at those. Let's look at the test dashboard. I'm going to use this because this is a big demo org we use. I'm not going to try to destroy someone else's dashboard, which I could do very rapidly using this tool. So this is our traditional JSON view. Again, you can spend time and figure this out. It's not that hard, but it's also not that intuitive. You'd have to go back and forth with the tool, read the docs, and you don't want to do that. But you probably would like to view it. So when we look at the view here, we're seeing a couple different charts here. I'm not a data analyst, and I don't do demos to show off really cool things, so my charts are kind of ugly. I don't have a clue why this ended up looking like this. I just built it and used it. So let's change that, because that's obviously not very useful there. So let's go up to our try it, and try it gives me the API I can do here. So I can say, let's try get chart widgets and execute that. And I have chart 2 and chart 1, I believe, yeah. So this is my JSON response. You could imagine writing a little bit of JavaScript that says take this and display these in a list, click on it, and take the next step here. So we're going to use that to do a set chart type. We'll do get chart type first. We'll say, what is chart 2? Is that the pie chart there? That's the horizontal bar. So it's chart 1 we're looking for, which is pi. And let's set the chart type for chart 1. We'll make it a vertical bar, V bar, like so. And Wave's very famous for doing these cool little transitions in between there. People go, ooh, wow, that's really neat. That's not really what Wave's all about, but that really gets everybody's attention, and it is definitely cool. It's the type of thing that makes it much more fun and interactive. So this is a way for us to interact with Wave externally, basically sending things in via the JavaScript API. But what we're also working on is how do we make this thing work really well with Lightning and Visualforce, as well as external things. So we're running here on Heroku. Let's move over here into the demo inside of Visualforce. I might shrink that just a little bit here. And what I've got here is 2 Lightning components and 1 Lightning component for Wave. So when you use Wave inside of Lightning Experience or Visualforce, you're actually using a Lightning component. We take the Lightning component and expose it via Lightning out into Visualforce, and we expose it into Lightning Experience. And inside of Wave, we've got our own libraries, own renderings, and that sort of thing. but it is truly a Lightning component. In fact, it has a set of attributes that you can set, you can get. And what we're doing now is adding the events so you can interoperate with that. And if you played around with Lightning at all, you know that it's a really cool way for you to build apps in a very disconnected fashion. So different apps can fire events and listen for events and do things very easily. The payloads are very simple. The way to call it's very simple. It's at most a few lines of code to interoperate with something. So what I've got here is a standard force record view component. The record view component is wrapped by a Lightning component that listens for an event that says, if I get a record ID, set the record ID attribute, which will then be displayed. And then inside of the wave piece here, in this POC, we've actually got it looking at the events coming back from wave. And wave actually fires events based upon selects and various changes for filters and that kind of thing. And it gets back things like record IDs. So let's pass that from wave to Lightning with an event here. So we'll click here on McCormick Incorporated. And we'll cross my fingers. We should see a force record view here. Well, hopefully. Am I getting an error here? I told you it was live. Let's try one more time. You know what? I may have to increase my timeout on this. Well, let me go modify the code here. I'll add a couple more seconds to it and see if that helps there. I told you this was, a live demo. So let's go here now. Let's see if that helps. If not, we'll move on because clearly I've managed to break my demo. All right. There we go. So there's a little bit of a timing issue there. So now if we click inside these, we see this changing over here. Now, this could be more exciting. This is a standard record view. But importantly, we now have the way to send events into Wave and get events back out of Wave. So you could build your traditional Lightning-based pages, your Visualforce pages. You could use these in App Builder and now interoperate with the Wave dashboard. Over time, we'll probably also make it more fine-grained to give you a way to interoperate with just the particular chart, not the entire dashboard itself. All right, a couple more quick things here. Seen the two demos here. Let's go into one more client, which is Slack. And Slack is the current, and no pun intended, the current hip chat piece there. And everybody's crazy about Slack. I think it's really cool myself, but boy, the momentum around this is incredible. And when I went to look at it, I was like, okay, I understand this now, because they've really done a great job of making their platform open and accessible. They've done some really cool things with their channels and that kind of thing. And I was able to build an integration using the SDK into Slack in just a couple of hours. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool there. So in this case, we're running the SDK on Heroku, on a Node.js server, and we're interoperating with Slack here. Slack actually needs a external HTTP endpoint to basically send stuff to you, post stuff to it. And what we do on the Node side is we allow you to do your authentication. You can log into Salesforce, and then you can make queries against Wave. You can show dashboards and that kind of thing. So I think I'm already logged in, but let's do Wave help. And this gives us a few of the commands. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit here. And this is the standard standalone client. You can run this on iOS, you can run it on Android, or you can run it on the web. And we can do things like Wave list queries. And these are those named queries which we talked about earlier. Oops, we'll do Wave login. And let's log into Salesforce here. All right, and then I need some more interaction there. It says basically close this and go back. Well, now we should do Wave list queries. And we see here the different named queries. We'll do Wave exec quiddity. Well, let's do the trailhead one we did. So trailhead, like so, and we say show more. And we can see here the same exact query coming back. Now, would you really want to do queries from there? Who knows? But you could push results into this as well. You can push things into Slack. But let's do something with the dashboard. Say wave show dash for short. And we'll do the filter test that we were looking at. And this will show me a little preview icon, like so, and give me a link to click and open it up into the wave tools here. Now, this is a case where we're getting back the data from the API, data from the SDK, as a dashboard or other, and we do a transform on the Node.js server into the format that Slack expects. And Slack basically says, create some attachments, and each attachment has things like text and links, and it can use a markdown-ish type markup. I found that it's not fully marked down, but it's something similar, and you can do some pretty cool stuff here and basically show things that interoperate. This is just a simple example, but the cool part is it shows what you can do with open APIs and things like SDKs. You can do a rapid integration. It doesn't take weeks or months to build this kind of thing. It's a thing you can do in a few hours or a few days. And that, to me, is very telling. That's very important. That's the kind of productivity we're trying to get to with our SDK. Okay, let me bring up the final set of slides somewhere in here. There we go. Okay, now it's time for some Q&A, and I'll be happy to take questions here for a few minutes. I'll also be around today. Just come and find me. I'm happy to talk about this. I'm very passionate about it, and would like to encourage you to basically check out things on Trailhead. You can get a Wave instance and play with it on a developer instance, and then reach out to us. We've got a success community, partner community. I'm ssauls@salesforce.com. I'm also skipsauls on Twitter. So just reach out to us, and we'll show you things. And we'd like to hear what you want to do, what kind of things we can do to make it a better platform for you. With that, I'll say thanks, and we'll take a little bit of Q&A. Yes?
Can the data flow through data from Postgres or something like that?
So the question is can the data flows pull it from outside data sources? The answer is yes. We have both our own connectors, and we have partners that do connectors. And you can actually, probably if you were a partner, build your own custom connection. But we'd recommend going to one of our partners who have built integrations to various other data sources. And you can take data from pretty much everything, because we turn it into something for Wave. It doesn't have to go into Salesforce S objects to do so. You don't have that in-between step.
And the data flow can be incremental as well, right?
It's not right now. It's probably not incremental like you're thinking about. It's going to rerun the data flow, and then basically you get a new version of the data set. You can go back to the older version, but it's not going to do just small incremental things unless you structured it like that. I think you'd have to be kind of clever about that. I think there's some features around some incremental pieces like that, but I don't think you can support that right now. All right, other questions? Yes.
Initially, when you started the session, you mentioned that it has better algorithm and you can pull more data. But when you actually adjusted the amount, by default it's set to 2,000 rows.
So the question here is, he said, you said, oh, you can do lots, and it says, by default, it showed 2,000 rows. That's simply part of the UI. It's generating that. You can actually change that. You can set it to be whatever you'd like to. But when you do a lot of charts, if you have graphs and that sort of thing, if you actually return back 1,000,000, the number of points being plotted probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense there. So that's what they're looking at is how to filter it there. But there's no actual limit on that. That's just part of the tool itself.
And when I pull up say million records, so does it time out or it will pull up, maybe it takes like 10 hours, 12 hours?
So there's a couple things you can do around that. You could have a timeout if you have something that's very large, because the fact of the matter is if you're trying to send that down to the client, it could take forever. It could be something that's effectively too large for it. If you're returning that much, you might have to rethink what you're trying to do there, because you should be doing more of a server-side filtering and trying to look at things. Returning back that many things to the client is probably not the ideal way to use Wave. And then we don't have the same API limits and timeouts that you would get with, say, Force.com REST APIs. There are some limits there, but it's not at the same level. Yes.
So on the data sets, when you were talking about the incremental loads, that's always growing the data set, right? Is that true?
So the question is about the incremental loads. Right now, there's not the incremental piece like you want to. It's actually rerunning the entire data flow. I don't know about the data set versioning and the timeouts and that kind of thing. Not really my area, but we can find out for you. Questions otherwise? Yes.
So a lot of the API stuff is showing that it's not usable with SalesWave, right? ServiceWave.
So the question is are these APIs usable with SalesWave and ServiceWave? The answer is you can use the API with any of those. In fact, if you have SalesWave or ServiceWave, you should be able to go and use the API and get to the same sort of data sets and dashboards and that kind of thing. I don't know about the licensing side of that because sometimes there will be a license restriction saying you can use the app and not the API. And currently there's probably not a technical limitation on it, but there may be a contractual limitation saying what you actually have access to because some of these things are packaged as an app that you can use, but you're not supposed to go build net new things on top of it. So you should check that before you go build new stuff because it's traditional auditing going on. It's saying, oh, somebody's using things that are outside of the bounds. We want you to use it, but the SalesWave and ServiceWave might have a contract piece on that.
And those dates you mentioned for releases, are those GA dates or beta dates?
So those will be for winter will be either a pilot or a dev preview. And it may be that there will be a GitHub-based version where you can actually get that yourself. Whenever we get to an official GA version, there will be an endpoint on Salesforce for the web-based pieces, like /wave, SDK, wave all, or something like that. But we hope to have things ready for people to use at Dreamforce, and have some things in the dev zone where you can actually get a little card, go to an org, use the SDK, and build a custom app very rapidly, showing things like Visualforce and Lightning working together with Wave. That's kind of the thing we're working towards. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So both you can declaratively create a data set, you can't edit it. You can't declaratively edit the data set, right?
You can't declaratively edit it? That's correct. Right now it's a one-way process. You can't take that back into the editor.
So how far away was that?
I don't know the roadmap on that piece. I'm really focused on the APIs and ALM. I don't know what the roadmap is. I know they're working on the round tripping, but I don't know what the dates are. Okay, with that, I'll say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. I'll be around pretty much the whole day for other questions.